Right now, hundreds of feet beneath the ocean's surface, there are factories operating in complete darkness. They process the energy that powers our cities, hidden from the world. But machines cannot run these abyssal megaprojects alone. They require human hands. To get those hands to the bottom of the sea, we didn't just have to engineer impossible submarines. We had to fundamentally alter the human body. We take ordinary factory workers, compress their atmosphere, change the gas in their blood, and lock them in a steel tube for a month. This is the world of saturation diving, the deadliest commute on Earth. When you flip a light switch or start a car, you are interacting with a vast, invisible network. Beneath the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and the coast of West Africa lies a sprawling industrial empire. Thousands of miles of steel pipelines, massive subsea manifolds the size of apartment buildings, valves weighing 50 tons. This is the underwater infrastructure that pumps millions of barrels of oil and gas every single day. It is a world built by robots, surveyed by autonomous drones, and monitored by satellites. But steel rusts. Pipes crack. Infrastructure degrades. And when a highly pressurized, thick-walled steel pipe needs to be cut, aligned to the millimeter, and welded perfectly in absolute darkness, a robot is useless. You need a human welder. But there is a problem. The ocean floor is not a place meant for biology. At a depth of 1,000 feet, the hydrostatic pressure is crushing. It is equivalent to having a jumbo jet parked on your chest. If a standard scuba diver tried to reach these depths, they would face an insurmountable barrier. It is not just about holding your breath or staying warm. It is about the fundamental laws of physics. Water is heavy. And as you descend, that weight pushes against every cell, every pocket of air, and every drop of blood in your body. To work here, engineers realized they couldn't just build a better submarine. They had to redesign the environment inside the human lung. The human body is mostly water, which is practically incompressible. The pressure itself will not crush your bones. The real danger is the air you breathe. At sea level, you breathe a mix of about 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. Under normal pressure, nitrogen goes in and out of your lungs without an issue. But as a diver descends into the abyss, the surrounding water pressure compresses the air supplied by their tank. At 100 feet, the nitrogen in the air begins to dissolve directly into the diver's bloodstream and tissues. At 150 feet, this dissolved nitrogen becomes toxic. It acts like a heavy narcotic. Divers experience the Martini effect, a state of intense intoxication, confusion, and euphoria. A diver might simply forget to breathe or take out their mouthpiece, believing they can drink the ocean. If a diver uses regular air to go deeper, they will lose consciousness and die. So, the first step to industrializing the abyss was changing the recipe of air. Scientists replaced nitrogen with helium. Helium is a much lighter gas, and it does not cause narcosis under pressure. The resulting mixture, called Heliox, allowed divers to descend hundreds of feet with clear minds. But this solved only half the equation. The dissolved gas was still in their blood. If a deep-water diver returns to the surface too quickly, the drop in pressure causes the dissolved helium to expand and form bubbles. This is decompression sickness, or the bends. Bubbles in the joints cause agonizing pain. Bubbles in the spinal cord cause paralysis. Bubbles in the brain cause sudden death. To dive to 600 feet for just 30 minutes of work, a diver would need to spend over 5 hours decompressing on the way back up. It was economically impossible. You cannot run a deep-sea factory if your workers spend 90% of their shift just waiting to come home. In 1957, a United States Navy medical officer named George F. Bond proposed a terrifying solution. What if the diver never came back up? What if we kept them at the bottom? Dr. Bond's theory was radical, but simple. After a certain amount of time under pressure, the human body's tissues absorb all the inert gas they possibly can. They become fully saturated. Once a diver is fully saturated, their decompression time is exactly the same whether they stay down for a day, a week, or a month. This discovery birthed the modern saturation diver. Today, these workers do not die from the surface. They live in the machine. On the deck of a massive dive support vessel, there is a hyperbaric living chamber. It is a steel cylinder, often less than 25 feet long and 7 feet wide. Inside, 4 to 6 men will live for up to 28 days. Before the job even begins, the heavy steel doors are locked from the outside. The crew is sealed in. Then, life support technicians slowly pump Heliox gas into the chamber. Over several hours, the pressure inside the tube builds, simulating a descent into the ocean. Even though the chamber is sitting perfectly dry on the deck of the ship. As the pressure increases, the physical world inside the chamber changes. The air becomes incredibly dense. It feels thick, almost like moving through a fluid. Because helium conducts heat 6 times faster than regular air. The temperature must be kept at a sweltering 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, just to prevent the divers from freezing to death. Then, there is the voice. The density of the helium alters the speed of sound, turning deep, gravelly voices into high-pitched, cartoonish squeaks. Communication becomes so difficult that the crew must use specialized electronic voice unscramblers just to understand one another over the radio. Once the chamber reaches the target pressure, say, equivalent to 600 feet of seawater, the divers are officially saturated. Their blood is saturated with helium. Their bodies are perfectly equalized with the crushing depth of the ocean floor. They are now trapped. If the steel hull of their chamber were to rupture, the sudden decompression would literally boil the blood in their veins, killing them in a fraction of a second. They are geographically on a ship, surrounded by hundreds of crew members. But biologically, they are more isolated than astronauts on the International Space Station. There is no emergency evacuation. If someone has a heart attack, they cannot be brought out. They are fully committed. And now, it is time to go to work. The daily commute for a saturation diver begins when they crawl through a narrow tunnel from their living quarters into a transfer lock, and finally, into the diving bell. The bell is a pressurized steel sphere, roughly the size of a large elevator car. Once 2 or 3 divers are secured inside, the heavy doors are clamped shut. The bell is detached from the main chamber and lifted into the air by a massive crane. Through tiny, thick acrylic portholes, the divers watch the deck of the ship disappear as the bell swings out over the churning ocean. Then, they are lowered. The descent is an exercise in claustrophobia and trust. The bell plunges through the photic zone, where sunlight quickly fades to a twilight gray, and then to absolute, impenetrable blackness. The water outside is near freezing. The only connection to the ship above is the umbilical. A thick lifeline containing breathing gas, hot water, communications, and power. As the bell drops deeper, the pressure outside equalizes with the immense pressure already inside. Finally, it comes to a halt, hovering just above the muddy, featureless bottom of the ocean floor. The divers are now at the job site. The bottom door of the bell is unsealed. Water does not rush in, because the internal gas pressure pushes it back perfectly. There is simply a circular hole in the floor, revealing the black, freezing water of the abyss. One diver remains inside as the tender, monitoring life support. The other puts on a heavy helmet, secures their umbilical, and drops through the hole. They are now an industrial factory worker, stepping onto a factory floor that is completely hostile to human life. The environment outside the belt is brutal. Visibility is often zero, clouded by swirling mud and debris. The diver must rely entirely on touch and the dim glow of their helmet lights to navigate a maze of massive steel pipes, jagged metal edges, and high-tension cables. The work is grueling physical labor. They are assembling pipeline connections, tightening bolts the size of a human arm using heavy hydraulic wrenches, or operating underwater cutting torches that burn at 10,000 degrees. Every movement is restricted by the umbilical cord. It is their only source of survival. If it gets snagged on a piece of wreckage, or severed by a sharp edge, the diver has only a few minutes of emergency gas stored on their back. The umbilical also pumps continuous hot water into the diver's specialized suit. At these depths, the ocean temperature is barely above freezing. Because of the helium in their system, a diver's body loses heat incredibly fast. Without the steady flow of hot water, severe hypothermia would set in within minutes. They are essentially tethered to life by a fragile, heated thread. And there is another invisible enemy lurking in the deep. High-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS. When diving past 500 feet, the sheer physical force of the pressure begins to disrupt the electrical signals in the human brain and central nervous system. Divers experience involuntary muscle tremors. Their hands shake. They suffer bouts of extreme lethargy, dizziness, and sudden, inexplicable microsleeps. Yet, despite the tremors, the cold, and the pitch black, the welder must perform flawlessly. A bad weld on a high-pressure oil pipeline can cause a catastrophic environmental disaster. The tolerances are exact. The margins for error are zero. For up to 6 hours. The diver labors in the freezing mud, wrestling with heavy steel, while breathing a gas mixture that is slowly altering their physiology. They are pushing the human machine to its absolute structural limit, performing tasks that no robot can replicate. When the shift is over, they follow the umbilical back through the dark, climbing back into the cramped, hot belly of the diving bell. They are hoisted back to the surface, locked back onto the main chamber, and they rest. They will do this every day, for 28 consecutive days. When the month-long contract is finally over, the hardest part of the job begins. The journey back to Earth. The divers are inside the steel chamber on the deck of the ship, but physically, they are still at the bottom of the ocean. They must undergo decompression. This is a painfully slow, meticulously calculated process. The pressure inside the chamber is bled off at a rate of roughly 100 feet per day. It can take a week, sometimes longer, just to return to atmospheric pressure. This waiting period is agonizing. The divers are exhausted, bruised, and mentally drained, yet trapped in a metal tube with a handful of other men. They watch the ocean and the crew through small portholes, unable to feel the sun, breathe fresh air, or hear a normal human voice. They are monitored constantly by life support technicians. A slight miscalculation in the bleed-off rate, or a mechanical failure in a valve, could trigger the bends, causing permanent injury or death before anyone could reach them. They must sit and wait while the microscopic bubbles of helium slowly, safely diffuse out of their tissues and leave their lungs. It is a slow unwinding of the physical trauma they have endured. Finally, the gauge is read 0. The pressure is equalized. The heavy steel locks are turned. The heavy door swings open, and for the first time in a month, the divers step out into the normal world. The air feels overwhelmingly light. The natural sounds of the ship seem deafening. Their voices return to normal. They have returned from an alien world. The oceans are the final, untamed frontier on Earth, yet we have built our modern civilization right through them. Beneath the quiet, rolling waves, the global economy hums. Millions of gallons of energy flow through steel veins in the dark. It is a flawless mechanical illusion, operating completely out of sight. But that illusion is maintained by flesh and blood. By individuals willing to surrender their physiology to the extreme forces of nature. Isolating themselves in metal tubes, just to keep the lights on for the rest of us. As long as we demand resources from the abyss, we will have to send humans down into the dark. The machines will get smarter. The robots will become more capable. But the deepest trenches of our industry still require the human element. The crushing pressure remains. The ocean waits. If you find yourself fascinated by the hidden megaprojects and extreme boundaries of our world, consider exploring further. The abyss is vast, and we have barely scratched the surface.